The kayak scraped against my private dock at 11:23 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I've been planning for 3 months. Marcus Chun, 42, a maritime attorney who'd inherited his grandfather's island property in Lake Winnipesaukee, stood on his deck watching an HOA board member plant a community property sign directly into his shoreline. 3 weeks of certified letters ignored. 3 weeks of ridiculous claims that his family's 87-year-old island somehow fell under their jurisdiction. But today, Marcus wasn't just a lawyer. He was a property owner with a briefcase full of historical deeds, and Rachel Morrison had just made the biggest mistake of her HOA career. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of justice served. Now, let's see exactly how this unfolded. This is a story in 3 parts. The violation that pushed a good person too far. The confrontation where power shifted completely. And the resolution where justice was finally served. Marcus Chun had spent every childhood summer on his grandfather's island, swimming in waters his family had owned since 1937, when he inherited the property 5 years ago. He thought he found peace, a sanctuary from courtroom battles and client demands. But the Lakeshore Estates HOA had other plans. Their new president, Rachel Morrison, decided that Marcus's island interfered with community aesthetics and declared it part of their waterfront management zone. She sent threatening letters about dock violations, demanded access for HOA boat tours, and even tried to fine him for his boathouse paint color. Every legal response Marcus sent was ignored. Every boundary he set was crossed. The final straw came when Rachel announced at a community meeting that she'd be reclaiming the island for HOA use. Rachel Morrison thought she could bully a quiet island owner into submission. What she didn't know was that Marcus specialized in maritime property law, had spent 2 weeks pulling century-old land grants from county archives, and had just discovered that his property rights extended far beyond what anyone imagined. The confrontation was going to be spectacular, and the resolution would change the entire HOA's understanding of who really owned what. Here's exactly how it happened. Marcus Chun had never wanted to be the guy who pulled out legal documents at neighborhood gatherings. At 42, he'd spent 2 decades navigating complex maritime disputes for shipping companies and waterfront developers. But his island was supposed to be different. His refuge. The 2.3-acre piece of land sat 300 yards from the mainland shore of Lake Winnipesaukee, connected only by boat. His grandfather, Wade Chun, had purchased it in 1937 for $800 from a lumber company, building the original cabin by hand over 5 summers. Marcus had inherited it 5 years ago, spending his weekends restoring the boathouse and replanting the native birch trees his grandfather had loved. He was methodical, private, and deeply respectful of the lake community, which made what happened next even more infuriating. The Lakeshore Estates HOA had existed for 15 years, governing the 47 homes along the eastern shore. Marcus's island predated the development by 7 decades, and he'd always assumed they understood he wasn't part of their jurisdiction. He attended the occasional community cleanup, donated to their July 4th fireworks fund, and kept his shoreline pristine. Friendly but separate. That changed when Rachel Morrison became HOA president 8 months ago. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday in April. Certified mail. Official letterhead, demanding Marcus pay $3,200 in retroactive waterfront management fees, dating back 3 years. He called the HOA office, explained politely that his property wasn't part of their development, and assumed that would end it. The compliance officer had seemed embarrassed, promised to look into it. Marcus went back to his case files, thinking it was resolved. 3 weeks later, Rachel herself showed up at his dock. She was 56, dressed in yacht club attire despite never owning a boat, and carried a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. She informed Marcus that his dock violated HOA waterfront. Guidelines had extended 12 feet. Instead of the approved 10, his boathouse was painted forest green instead of the approved coastal palette, and his island disrupted sightlines for mainland property owners. Marcus had stared at her, waiting for the punchline. When none came, he'd simply said, "My property predates your HOA by 70 years. I'm not subject to your rules." Rachel's smile had frozen. "We'll see about that," she'd replied. Stepping back into her borrowed pontoon boat, the harassment escalated methodically. Rachel sent letters weekly, each more aggressive. She claimed the HOA had waterway management authority granted by the township. She demanded Marcus submit architectural plans for his boathouse repairs. She threatened daily fines of $500 for non-compliance. Marcus responded through his paralegal with copies of his property deed and polite refusals. Every response was ignored. The breaking point came at the May HOA meeting, which Marcus attended specifically to resolve this face-to-face. He brought his original 1937 deed, county tax records, and a surveyor's report. Rachel didn't let him speak. Instead, she announced to the 30 assembled homeowners that the HOA would be reclaiming island access rights for community use. She proposed monthly boat tours around Marcus's property, declared his shoreline a community wildlife viewing area, and suggested the island might make an excellent location for the annual HOA summer party. Several homeowners looked uncomfortable. Most stayed silent. Marcus sat in the back row, his jaw tight, watching Rachel distribute maps that labeled his family's island as Lakeshore Estates Community Resource Zone A. He tried the reasonable approach. He tried ignoring her. He tried legal correspondence. Rachel Morrison had made it clear she wouldn't stop until he either paid her fabricated fees or surrendered his privacy. Marcus Chun left that meeting and spent the next 2 weeks in county archives, historical societies, and the state land office. If Rachel wanted a legal fight, he'd give her one she'd never forget. And on a Saturday morning in June, when she arrived to plant her ridiculous sign, everything was finally ready. Marcus watched Rachel's pontoon boat approach his dock at exactly 11:15 a.m. She wasn't alone. 2 HOA board members flanked her: Trevor Walsh, the vice president who always looked vaguely apologetic, and Denise Park, the treasurer who seemed to enjoy conflict. They carried a surveyor's tripod, a metal sign reading, "Community Property, Lakeshore Estates, HOA," and enough confidence to make Marcus almost feel bad about what was coming. Rachel stepped onto his dock without permission, her boat shoes squeaking against the wet wood. "Mr. Chun," she announced loudly, as if addressing a crowd, "we're here to formally establish HOA jurisdiction over this waterfront property. You've had 3 weeks to respond to our access requirements. Your silence constitutes acceptance under HOA Bylaws Section 7.3. Marcus stood on his deck, coffee mug in hand, and said nothing. Just watched her position the sign on his shoreline grass. "As of today," Rachel continued, pulling out her phone to take photos, "this island will be designated for community recreational use. We'll be installing additional signage next week and scheduling the first community boat tour for July 4th weekend." That's when Marcus walked down to the dock, carrying the briefcase he prepared. He moved calmly, without hurry. Rachel Morrison, 56 years old, 447 Lakeview Drive, HOA president for 8 months. He watched her freeze. Trevor Walsh, 43, 512 Lakeview Drive, HOA vice president, owns the accounting firm downtown. Trevor's face went pale. Denise Park, 51, 389 Lakeview Drive, retired paralegal who should probably know better. Rachel's smile faltered. "What exactly do you think you're—" "I'm a maritime property attorney," Marcus interrupted quietly. "I specialize in waterfront boundary disputes, historical land grants, and HOA overreach. Which is why I spent the last 2 weeks in county archives, the state land office, and the New Hampshire Historical Society. Want to know what I found?" He opened his briefcase on the dock railing. The first document was his grandfather's 1937 deed, encased in protective plastic. Wei Chum purchased this island, and here's the important part: all waters within 500 feet of the shoreline. He pulled out a second document. This is the original land grant from the lumber company. It includes mineral rights and, quote, exclusive navigational rights to surrounding waters as designated by survey map. 447B, Rachel's confidence was cracking. That's irrelevant. Modern HOA regulations supersede. Modern HOA regulations, Marcus continued, his voice still calm, can't supersede a recorded property deed with riparian rights established 87 years ago. Especially when he produced a third document, this one with the state seal. Those rights were reaffirmed in 1982 when the lake was rezoned. My grandfather appeared before the zoning board specifically to protect these waters. He spread out a laminated survey map on the dock. This red line shows my property boundary. Notice how it extends 500 feet from my shoreline in all directions. He traced it with his finger. Your pontoon boat? You're currently floating on my property. That dock where you launched from? The one the HOA built 3 years ago? 200 feet inside my boundary. Trevor Walsh made a strangled sound. Denise Park had her phone out, clearly looking up property records. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, pulling out a final document. This is a cease and desist order. I'll be filing Monday morning if that sign isn't removed in the next 60 seconds. It also includes a formal trespassing complaint for today's incident, documentation of your harassment over the past 3 months, and a property rights violation claim for your unauthorized dock construction. Rachel's face had gone from confident to gray. You can't. I can, Marcus interrupted. And I will. Option 1, remove your sign. Dismantle your dock from my waters within 30 days. Issue a formal apology at the next HOA meeting, and never contact me again. Option 2, I file this paperwork Monday. Notify every homeowner that their HOA president built community property on private land without permission, and sue the HOA for property rights violations. The choice is yours. You have 60 seconds to decide. He checked his watch and waited. Rachel Morrison stared at the survey map, at the historical deeds, at the state documents with official seals. Trevor Walsh grabbed the sign they'd just planted and yanked it from the ground. Rachel, he said urgently, we need to leave. Now. Rachel opened her mouth, closed it, and finally managed, this isn't over. Marcus smiled for the first time. Actually, it is. 45 seconds. They scrambled back into the pontoon boat, leaving the surveyor's tripod behind in their haste. Marcus watched them motor away, then poured his now cold coffee over the dock railing into his waters. His waters. Legally, historically, undeniably, his the emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening. Marcus didn't attend. He sent his paralegal, Jennifer, with copies of every document in protective folders for each board member and a formal statement to be read aloud. Jennifer called him afterward, barely containing her laughter. Rachel tried to spin it as a misunderstanding. Then Trevor stood up and said they needed to remove the community dock immediately before you took legal action. Half the homeowners had already looked up the property records online. 3 people asked why the HOA had spent $18,000 building a dock on someone else's property. The dock came down within a week. Marcus watched from his island as a barge arrived with a work crew, dismantling the floating structure section by section. Rachel wasn't there. Trevor supervised, waving apologetically at Marcus from across the water. Marcus waved back. No hard feelings toward Trevor. He'd clearly been steamrolled by Rachel's confidence. But the story didn't end there. 2 homeowners contacted Marcus directly, apologizing for not speaking up at the May meeting. They'd felt intimidated by Rachel's aggressive leadership style. One of them, Margaret Chin, no relation, though they joked about it at community cleanups, mentioned that Rachel had been pressuring several homeowners about other violations. Mailbox colors, tree trimming schedules, garden gnome regulations. She's turned the HOA into her personal fiefdom, Margaret said. What you did showed us we don't have to just accept it. By the next HOA meeting in July, Rachel Morrison had resigned. The official reason was personal commitments, But the real reason spread through neighborhood gossip channels immediately. 3 homeowners had filed formal complaints about her management style. 2 had threatened to sue over spurious fines she'd levied. The HOA board voted 6-1 to accept her resignation and issued a formal apology to Marcus in writing. Trevor Walsh became interim president. His first act was to invite Marcus to the August meeting, not to demand anything, but to thank him. "You could have destroyed us in court," Trevor admitted in front of the assembled homeowners. "You had every right to sue for the dock construction, for harassment, for trespassing. Instead, you gave us a chance to make it right. We appreciate that." Marcus had shrugged. "I don't want conflict. I just want to be left alone to enjoy my grandfather's island." The complications came from an unexpected source. When Trevor's team had been researching the property boundaries to ensure full compliance, they discovered something interesting. 3 other waterfront homeowners had similar riparian rights extending into the Lake Older, properties purchased before the HOA existed. None of them had realized it. The HOA had been collecting waterfront management fees from them for years. Trevor, to his credit, brought it to the board immediately. They voted to refund the fees and update all HOA documentation to clearly exclude pre-existing properties from waterfront regulations. It cost the HOA $47,000 in refunds and legal fees, but it was the right thing to do. Marcus heard later that 2 board members had wanted to fight it quietly, but Trevor had insisted on transparency. The homeowners respected that. 2 months after the confrontation, Marcus sat on his dock at sunset with his sister Lily, who'd flown in from Seattle for her annual visit. "So you're the island lawyer legend now," she teased, sipping her wine. "I just wanted them to leave me alone," Marcus said. "You did more than that," Lily replied. "Margaret called me. Yes, we're Facebook friends now, and said you changed how the whole HOA operates. They're actually reading bylaws now, instead of just doing whatever Rachel said. Trevor's implementing term limits." 3 new people joined the board specifically to prevent another Rachel situation. Marcus looked out at his island, at the restored boathouse his grandfather had built, at the birch trees swaying in the evening breeze. No community signs. No unauthorized boats. No harassment letters. Just peace, exactly as it should have been from the start. He'd learned something his grandfather had known all along. Sometimes the quietest people carry the most powerful documents. And when you know your rights, really know them, with century-old deeds and state-certified surveys, you don't need to shout. You just need to wait for the right moment to present the truth. Rachel Morrison had tried to claim his island. Instead, she'd lost her power, her position, and her credibility. Justice, Marcus thought, tasted like lake water at sunset, cool, clean. And exactly right. Across the country in Portland, Oregon, Elena Rodriguez, a 39-year-old structural engineer, received a certified letter demanding she remove the wheelchair ramp she built for her disabled daughter. The HOA claimed it violated architectural uniformity standards. Elena smiled the same smile that once preceded her presentations to city planning boards and pulled out the Americans with Disabilities Act documentation she prepared 3 months ago, anticipating this exact confrontation. The HOA president went pale when Elena mentioned federal protected rights. But that's a story for another time.